Hello, techies. Welcome to the Tech Times Africa podcast, where we'll bring you the latest stories on tech and startups in Africa. Catch us every Thursday at 10 a.m. WAT on techtimesafrica.podbean.com. Let us know what you think by giving us feedback in the comments or on our socials. Now, on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tech Times Africa podcast. I'm Kelvin, and with me is Karen. How are you doing today, Karen?
Morning, Kelvin. I'm doing great. It's starting to get sunny here, so feeling good. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. I think we've had some rain here in Nigeria over the weekend, but it's mostly still sunny. Thankfully, the heat from February is beginning to reduce, so happy about that. Going into the conversation for the day, we have a couple of positive stories, negative stories. We would be talking about Lipa Later, as well as Raxio raising some funds to expand data infrastructure in Africa. Lagos coastline is becoming an interesting destination for data center investors. We'll talk about Nigeria's stablecoin as well as a few other topics. Let's start with Lipa Later. Lipa Later was a buy now, pay later fintech. They raised 12 million in seed funding and 10 million in debt and equity. But despite raising these funds, the idea didn't scale, it seems. They had some issues with late payments towards the ending for their employees, had issues with their suppliers trying to get their money back. It seems they had a number of issues, and this is a tricky one because we have seen a lot of buy now, pay later trends across Africa. So when I saw this news that this one didn't work, immediately I'm concerned about others that are doing the same model. What do you think about this, Karen? Because Lipa Later was a Kenyan startup, so I didn't really know about them until, I guess, the later ends. They haven't shut down. They are just in administration, so maybe they would come back. But most of the time when we see startups enter administration, they never really come back. So yeah, wanted to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah, it's really shocking to see this because Lipa Later was one of the most successful, if not the most successful, buy now, pay later startup in Kenya. And they had set up a really good logistics and business model where you would go to a retailer, you would get a phone or other electronics or anything that you really needed in your home and then pay later. They were doing quite well. I know that even before getting the 10 million, which they got at the end of last year, which shocks you even more, that you're getting funding and then couple of months later, you're in administration. Startup founders need to understand that sometimes when it comes to running a business, funding is not your biggest issue. Your business model could be the biggest problem. Because with this kind of funding coming in, you would expect that they're able to sustain themselves for a while longer. They got 12 million funding in 2022, and then they got more funding last year, and still we're seeing them in receivership. So I think the biggest issue comes in repayment from the people that they lend to. Their capacity to look at credit records of the people who are borrowing. When you put that together with the economic issues that we are facing as a country and as a continent, there's a lot more lack of payment of loan facilities from people. And I think that kind of caused problems for them, especially because following up on payments with people when you don't have proper records is a bit difficult. The reason why banks are able to follow up is because if you don't pay, they're able to follow a certain process and get back their money, even if it means auctioning something from you. But with a buy now, pay later model, how exactly do you even trace the person who bought these things? How are you able to put up the right processes and procedures to make sure that you get your money back? And I think that was the biggest challenge with Lipa Later. It creates a little bit of worry in terms of investor trust when it comes to this business model for other companies. And so I think startup owners who are in this financial segment or industry who are doing this kind of business model, they have to figure out a way of ensuring that, number one, they do the right KYC, know your customer, before you lend money to them. How are you able to do proper KYC? How are you able to put in processes that ensure that you will get your money back in time so that you're able to sustain operations? I think that is what comes to mind when it comes to this issue.
Yeah, with this model, it's very important that you figure out how to get your money back. So what they are trying to solve is the issue of collateral. With banks, you need collateral before you can take a loan, and that's why the banks do not have as much to worry about when people take loans. But when you're trying to make finance accessible to more people, you remove that collateral, but that brings the issue of trying to recover your money in case someone defaults. And sometimes people can be funny and maybe try to see whether they can get past the system. And if you don't have measures for that, like you talked about, then it's going to be very hard to get your money back. Some of the buy now, pay later startups in Africa, what they do is you have to upload your maybe 6 months bank statement, and they use, I guess, some software to go through that and then determine how much you can get as a loan. But even that, you still are relying on the customer to pay at the time that they are supposed to pay. So I wonder if there are some ways that they can enforce collection of these loans since they don't have collateral. What if the customer says they don't want to pay? What can you actually do? And then when you're trying to scale this, how many people can you take to court, for example? If you want to go that route, how many people can you take to court? So it's a very tricky one. First of all, deciding who gets a loan and based on their financial records, and then trying to enforce collection.
Yeah, 100%. And I like what you said in terms of people can be funny. Last year, I was listening to a conversation about, I can't remember who it was, but we were talking about corruption in government. And he made a really good point because he said, it's not that our governments are corrupt. It's not just that. It's that as a people, we are corrupt. And I think this is one of the ways that shows that, especially in Kenya. And I don't know about if it's the same in Nigeria and other African countries, but people will always look for a shortcut, right? When it comes to understanding your market, I think that is fundamental for fintechs in Africa, to understand that fundamentally you're selling to a market that if they don't have to pay, they probably will not pay. Because there's an element of trust. There are those people who, if they borrow money, they know they have to pay it back. One way or another, it's on their mind to pay it back. But we also have the flip side of that. And so you have to set up the right processes to ensure that that is done. Yeah, so moving forward to good news, some good news. And we're seeing data center and infrastructure for data centers becoming a big trend in Africa right now. Raxio has secured $100 million from IFC to expand Africa's data infrastructure. And this will boost AI, it will boost cloud computing, it will boost fintech growth. And I think it will also advance data inclusion. I was really shocked, though, I have to say, by the countries that they are focusing on, because they were not countries that were on my radar. When I read this, my mind immediately went to Nigeria, and I think the next topic we focus on will probably let the listener know why I thought that way. But they're focusing on Ethiopia, Mozambique, Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, Tanzania, and Angola. And honestly, these are not countries that have been on my radar when it comes to tech and data center infrastructures. One of the things that excites me is we're seeing more countries in Africa, starting with Nigeria and I think Kenya as well, that are putting in place policies to start encouraging our local companies to store data internally. And now we're seeing a company that is trying to ensure that we have enough data centers and resources and infrastructure to actually get that done. And I think we will see a lot more control of our data going forward, which is a really exciting thing. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, same thing. I was surprised as well about the countries, but in a way, I wasn't surprised not to see Nigeria there as well, because a couple of episodes ago we talked about power, and Nigeria doesn't have enough power at the moment to power a data center. So maybe that's one of the issues they haven't figured out how to deal with Nigeria. But definitely there will be some consideration to going to Nigeria at some point because it's such a big market. With the other countries, it was good to see these other countries that don't get involved in the conversation so much when they are talking about startups in Africa. So yeah, definitely need to start keeping an eye out on these other countries.
Yeah, absolutely. Clearly, they have quite some importance in the development of technology in Africa because I think data centers are like the backbone of technology. Obviously, we will start to see a lot more digital entrepreneurship as this continues to grow and a lot more remote work adoption and a lot more cloud-based innovations in Africa. So I'm waiting to see how that will affect in the next maybe 5 or so years as this continues to grow. So it's very exciting.
Exciting times indeed. It would also be a plus for online gamers from Africa because that's one of the challenges with that. You have data centers that are not in Africa, so the ping time from when you do an action in the game to when it actually happens in the game is quite long. So it's tricky playing games online from Africa. So that opens up a very big market. The gaming market is quite large, even in Africa. So I look forward to how this can be expanded, and this is definitely one of the startups I will be rooting for going forward.
Yeah, if I can ask you, do you think that gaming in Africa can actually become a business where we have people earning a living from gaming? Because I have seen a few people who have made quite a lot of money from being gamers, and it's very shocking. Maybe because I'm a millennial, I don't know. Perhaps younger generations, it's easier to understand how that happens. But do you think that that is a trend we will see moving forward where we have Africans actually making comfortable living from gaming?
Yeah, it's definitely one that can happen. We just haven't had the right infrastructure, one, and I guess internet speeds as well also goes under infrastructure. So we need the data centers here so that these big companies can have some of their servers hosted in Africa as well. But then you also need the internet. So the internet is the other side of the equation. With that, I believe we can have people earning from gaming down the line. I even met a couple of people sometime in 2023 that are gamers. They have had the opportunity to game at a regional scale, at least in Africa. And I've also met game developers as well, people that build some of these mobile games and even indie games. There is a market for that, and in terms of the amount of money that's involved in gaming, the gaming industry is bigger than both the music and movie industry combined.
What?
Because people spend a lot on games. That's the reality of it. People spend a lot on games. So there's an opportunity there. And if you have these data centers here, that solves one of the problems. The other problem will be internet. We have been seeing collaborations with MTN and Airtel that we talked about last week. Starlink is also making inroads. So hopefully, as the infrastructure for internet gets better and we start to have the data centers, definitely there's an opportunity there for people to make money from games full time.
Interesting. Oh, that's exciting. I did not know that gaming is so big. Wow. All right. I must become a writer in the gaming industry now.
Yeah, we'll see how this develops. Speaking of data centers, investors are flocking into Lagos to build data centers. Particularly, they are looking at the Victoria Island and Lekki areas. So Lagos is divided into two. the island and the mainland. So the island, as the name implies, is surrounded by water. And the cost of living in that area gets higher as you get closer to the water. The key thing with this is that we have seen a couple of companies bring submarine cables to Africa, but a number of them are actually in Lagos. This means that the internet speeds at these locations will be very high. And this is exactly what you need for a data center. You need it to be very close to these submarine cables, because these submarine cables are what carries the ridiculous amount of data that is transferred over the internet every day. So if you can be close to the submarine cable, which uniquely Lagos is, then it's a good place to build a data center. So just piggybacking off the previous conversation, there is some investment going into Lagos in this sense. But like I said, the power issue is one that you still need to think about. What I tell with Nigeria is that in certain locations, you have more power than others. This means that you pay more to be in those locations, so the electricity per unit is higher in those locations. But it means you also get more power. For example, in my place, I get about 20 hours per day of power, and so I pay a higher tariff on electricity. So some of those locations, especially on the Lagos Island, also have that higher tariff. Again, they can get more electricity since they are in those areas, and it kind of mitigates the issues with power. But then you still have to have a backup solution, because we are seeing issues where the national grid is down and, well, everybody just doesn't have power for a couple of hours. So you still need a backup solution for that. We would see how this develops, but it's definitely optimistic seeing this type of moves in Nigeria.
Yeah, that is really shocking for me, hearing that 20 hours of power is something that gets to cost you more. I'm very interested in seeing how green energy and renewable energy will advance in Nigeria. And I'm very interested in that field because I co-own a startup that is trying to enter into the renewable energy space. But for Kenya, I think the biggest issue right now for us is that electricity is becoming a lot more expensive, and we're seeing people wanting to move into solar power just because of the cost, not because of unreliability. I think at most I have had maybe one day of no power, probably in 6 months or in a whole year. And usually it is that the government will announce that it is doing some maintenance issues or something like that, and so power is not available for that day, and it causes a riot if it goes beyond certain number of hours. So it's very shocking to hear that, but I do also see the opportunity for innovation in terms of green energy and renewable energy in Nigeria to sustain that, because I think you guys have a bit of land where it's quite dry, and so solar farms would be a really ideal way to go. And I will actually do some research on seeing are there companies that are actually trying to solve this problem, because I do see Nigeria being an entryway, and I do think investors are eyeing Nigeria as the gateway to West Africa's digital boom, because you guys have a lot of innovation going on. I think there are very brilliant minds that live in Nigeria. I also think that there are very ambitious and confident people in Nigeria. You guys actually go after what it is that you want to build. And so with that kind of investor confidence happening for the country, and also being that now the submarine cables are right on your doorfront, I do hope to see more innovations in energy that can support that ecosystem, and you guys become an entryway into West Africa and probably even Central Africa through Nigeria.
It's definitely one that is surprising, because as big as Nigeria is, you would think that power wouldn't be an issue at the moment, but it is. And it's like you said, it's also an opportunity for someone to come and do something in terms of innovation. And one of the companies that we'll be talking about later on is trying to solve this problem in their own way. But Beyond that, it would also come down to regulation and how the government responds to this. I believe over the last week, we also saw an announcement where the government said they will be banning the importation of solar panels. This makes it tricky for solar adoption, for example. How do investors respond to that? So yeah, it also comes down to government regulation. You can innovate all you want, but if you don't have government support, then it makes everything a bit harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that creates a great segue into the next topic, Rivy, which has rebranded. It was formerly Payhippo, and they have rebranded into Rivy, and they've secured $4 million for clean energy financing. That is good news for the country. They must have done their due diligence and their market research and realized that there's a need for funding in the energy space. And it's an AI-powered lender that focuses on renewable energy. In its pre-series A funding round has gotten $4 million, which shows investor confidence in renewable energy in Africa. Now, something to just think about is this is a major pivot for them, right? Because formerly they were just funding SMEs. Now they've done a major pivot from fintech to climate tech, which shows that there's investor appetite for sustainable impact startups in Africa and specifically in energy. And as we have discussed, the growth of data centers in Africa and especially Nigeria, where Rivy is based, there's definitely a need. And now the question that you have raised for me is how much will the government support this kind of innovations and these kinds of businesses so that we can see sustainable energy coming into Africa? What are your thoughts?
So I remember how I support and always root for Jumia. Well, when I saw this startup and what they are trying to do, I started rooting for them as well. This is definitely another one of those startups that I would like to see succeed. Especially recently, I keep on doing something around solar in terms of getting an inverter. I got a portable inverter from EcoFlow recently and also got a solar panel as well. And just over the weekend, I was looking at Fuani's solar inverter for the home. So because of the power issues in Nigeria, it's definitely an opportunity for someone doing something in the space. Rivy at the moment, what they are doing is to empower individuals, businesses, and other corporate bodies to get solar solutions for their space and kind of doing a buy now and pay later model. But then we talked about a buy now, pay later model earlier that didn't work out. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, I hope it doesn't end in that. But so far, so good. They seem to have some investor confidence and they are getting more funding. So I am optimistic about this and I definitely want to see them succeed.
Yeah, it's definitely raised my hopes being someone that is in the green energy space and specifically solar, because one of the biggest dreams for Taswira Agrovoltaics is to work with farmers where they put up the solar panels on their land, they till below the land, they generate more than enough electricity for their own farms, and then we collect any extra energy and redistribute it. The thing about Africa is we have a lot of arid and semi-arid areas that would benefit from solar energy farming. And you can cultivate your crops underneath the solar panels because it actually reduces the amount of water that you are losing through evaporation. But at the same time, you're generating electricity. And one of the things that as a country we're very grateful for is our former president, Mwai Kibaki, the late, because during his tenure, he actually took electricity to the rural areas. Both of my grandparents have electricity in their homes, and it has always been affordable until the past few years. But when my father moved to his land, which is also in a semi-arid area, electricity had not yet come to that area, and so he bought solar panels. The one thing that really discouraged us was 2 years later, the batteries gave out. because he actually did not buy like German batteries. He bought China batteries, and they no longer keep enough power for him to run his refrigerator. He's able to watch TV and put on the lights in the house, but he's not able to run heavier electronics in the house, which tells us that there's a lot still in terms of education on what it is you're supposed to look out for when you're buying these gadgets for your solar or even for any other renewable energy. We actually have a farm in Kenya right now that is using windmills. It's a windmill farm, and it's generating a lot of power and redistributing it to the people around the area. So such innovations, I think, are the future for Africa, because we have the land. We have quite a lot of land that is not filled with bricks. And if we can cooperate with farmers and other areas where there's large acres of land that are not being used, we can find other solutions that are more sustainable and probably more affordable for everyone involved.
Yeah, definitely. Renewable energy is one that we have to be looking at in Africa, because we just have all of this land, have all of this sunlight, have all of this wind, have all of this water. So definitely you need to take advantage of these sources. So we'll see how this develops in coming years. 5 years will be a good time, because we've seen that startups don't get to that 5-year mark. So definitely I'm hopeful that Rivy does get to that. Moving on, we have seen Nigeria's cNGN stablecoin struggling to gain adoption. So now they are trying to get listings on some of these exchanges like Yellow Card and Roku that are quite popular in Africa. But the challenge is that the exchanges are not yet seeing the adoption in Africa. And so that's making them reluctant to list the coin. It brings me back to one of the previous episodes of the podcast where I was saying that I didn't really see what the need for this coin was at the time, because the digital naira is already quite good. It's very easy to transfer naira from point A to point B. Granted, there are some hiccups sometimes, but a lot of the time it's very fine. So I couldn't see what the value would be in Nigeria. And then outside Nigeria, except you are doing business, for example, maybe paying somebody in another part of Africa, where is really the use case or the demand for a crypto-based naira? This is the issue that they are struggling with. They want to gain adoption by listing on these exchanges, but these exchanges want to see adoption before they can list them. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem.
Yeah, I honestly think this is one of those innovations that is probably a good innovation, but too early. I think as a continent, we are yet to see a big adoption of cryptocurrency. We're still seeing people trying to understand what it is and trust it. So I feel that the problem is that this is too early, and the education of the masses, the building of trust, the understanding of the market for the product that they are trying to bring out, I think it's too soon. That is my opinion. I also think that they are trying to convince the Nigerian population or even the African population to trust in a stable coin that is backed by a system that they are already trying to run away from because it's deeply affected by inflation. So what problem are you solving? Goes back to what we were discussing the other day. Is it that we're solving a problem, or are we innovating for innovation's sake? Now, you could argue that the stable coin will be good for instant remittances when we're transferring money across borders, or e-commerce payments, or hedging against the naira when it's volatile. Absolutely. But how many people, for example, if we do money transfers across borders, right? Would you be able to transfer this to me when I don't even trust it? I don't understand it. So I feel that this is a case of innovation that is too early. an innovation that is probably not the right fit for the market right now. I do believe that in future, it probably is a great innovation. But I think that right now, looking at the other issues that need to be solved in the African continent, when it comes to finance and payment systems, I feel that this is just an innovation that is too early for the market.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. For me, I personally feel it's an innovation that's not needed because there wasn't a demand for it the way there wasn't a demand for the e-Naira that was launched a couple of years ago and is still struggling with adoption. It's still the same feelings I have for this crypto-based Naira. So I guess the future would reveal more and we'll see.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Moving on to innovations that are actually needed. Caantin is doing some AI work in Africa, and they are introducing AI voice technology to replace augmented call center agents in Africa. The thought is that these AI agents are able to handle higher volumes of customer service requests in local languages, which is a really big undertaking because we have so many languages. Even just in Nigeria alone, if you come to Kenya, you have so many tribes with so many dialects and so many accents, and then there's slang. So that is a key differentiator, I think. And I honestly believe that this is an innovation that is actually needed in the market. And I would love to hear your thoughts.
It's an interesting proposition they are trying to offer. They want to be able to essentially be the call center for businesses. It's something that's needed, but we have seen some implementation of this that has struggled with other startups. So Chowdeck, we've talked about Chowdeck in the past, and they laid off some of their employees. And part of the reasons they did that was to use AI bots for support channels. And even I have used these AI bots as well. And sometimes they just get lost in the conversation. Sometimes they just abandon the conversation. And just last week, we saw a number of complaints from different people just getting fed up with trying to get support for their orders because since that announcement, there has been a lot of delays with getting orders or getting feedback on the status of your order. So execution is very important. While they want to do this innovation, you need to be sure about how you're going about executing it. And going through voice, well, they are not doing chatbots, they are going through voice because they believe voice will be the way that AI breaks into Africa. And I believe so too, because we are very voice driven in Africa. So definitely having an AI bot that can sound human with different languages would be very, very interesting. But I have doubts because of some of the challenges I've seen with some other startups implementing this AI support.
Yeah, I completely hear you. I think the SOPs will have to be really good. The processes will have to be very clear. The differentiation between where AI meets human will also need to be very clear. At what point do I need a human intervention in my customer service journey? Because I do believe that we cannot completely get rid of the human touch yet. So those are some things that they will have to be clear on. But I do believe that if they are able to sort out the issues that we have seen previously, this could be a very successful endeavor, especially because it is people oriented, where it actually cares about the different languages. I think that's the part that's exciting me, where we're not being forced to learn the English language and communicate and get our service based on someone else's language, but rather it's coming down to who we are as a people and how we are able to do business in our own native languages. So that's exciting for me. But I do see what you're saying, and I agree with it 100%. The manner in which the processes will be carried out is critical.
Yeah, but still, what they are doing is amazing. Normally, I'm optimistic about tech, but sometimes AI can be very tricky. And these are still the early days, so it will take some learning, but eventually, it will definitely be one to look out for. I should also add that Caantin is a Zambian AI communication startup. but they work with startups from different countries. They worked with Cowrywise in Nigeria. They worked with Top Up Mama in Kenya. So they seem to be crossing borders with their solution too. Definitely want to keep an eye out on.
Yeah, and really exciting to hear that it's from a different country. So Zambia, way to go.
Yeah, they are doing well. They are doing well, and I hope they keep doing well. And that's all for this episode of the Tech Tides Africa podcast. If you have enjoyed the conversation, do leave a comment, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Tech Tides Africa podcast. Remember, leave a comment or share with your friends. We'll see you next Thursday at the same time and place you get your podcast. Until then, stay well.